Hello and welcome to Subjective Cinema. I am your host, who is doing her best, Anna Dodds, and today I am here with Nicolette to talk about Loving Vincent.
Hello.
So, how are you, Nicolette? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am so good. Thank you so much. And of course, my dog might be wandering in and out. So sorry. I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. Let's see, a little bit about me. I'm getting my master's degree in museum studies. I work in a museum, in an art museum specifically. So I feel like I've got a pretty good art history, art education background. And then I'm also just a big fan of Vincent van Gogh in general. That's why I chose Loving Vincent for our film today. It was sort of the thing that got me started into reading so much about Vincent van Gogh, and then I just fell in love with him, and I've just been kind of like, I don't want to say obsessed, but obsessed basically with Vincent van Gogh ever since. So this movie is really special, and I'm really excited to talk about it. So thank you for giving me a chance to. You know, I love to talk about things that I like.
Yeah, man, who doesn't? That's why I'm asking people this. It's like, who doesn't want to talk about themselves through a thing they like?
Exactly.
So let's see, just to keep making small talk for a minute, have you seen any good movies lately?
Yes, I have seen Netflix's new Over the Moon, the
Oh,
animated
yeah.
feature. Oh, it's so good. If you haven't seen it, you basically have to. Like, I don't know what you're doing if you haven't seen it. It's about like a Chinese myth of the moon goddess and this little girl who wants to prove that she exists by building a rocket and flying there. And it's just hilarity ensues, and Chang from Community is in it. It's just really good, really well done. But movies with people in them though, oh, I don't know. I don't think I have.
That is so fair. Speaking of the state of the world, have you been doing anything to keep yourself busy? Like, how are you staying sane? I know this is the new
Oh,
normal now, but still.
well, early on, like right when the shelter in place order came down, I went out and bought a Switch and Animal Crossing, and so I've been doing that. But recently, my Switch got water damaged, and I had to send it off. I had to get a new one. They gave me a new one, and I had to start my island all over. And now I'm just so tired. I just don't want to do it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I just and I like don't like the new one as much as I liked the old one. So that that kept me pretty busy. I mean, over the summer I worked at a summer camp, basically in isolation, and they were very strict about COVID protocols. I mean, they had a whole host of rules. So we were actually able to have like kids at the camp and like have a relatively normal time. We all were wearing masks basically the whole time, but it was good to get out of my house for a bit, even if it meant like not being able to leave the mountains basically. Like I just was sequestered on this mountainside for 2 months, but
Wait,
it
what
was,
mountains? You're still in Georgia, right? Did you leave the state
yeah,
and
no,
visit somewhere in Georgia?
yeah, it left the state. I was in North Carolina, so I was in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Cool, cool.
Gorgeous area, gorgeous camp, lovely people, and I was a nanny for the children of the staff, and so we had a great time with small children. It was very sweet. So I feel like I've been really lucky to be able to do that, and then
Yeah.
have a Switch with me, and then my family's like, I live at home with my parents, so they've been really great, and now I have my job at the museum to keep me busy, so
Yeah,
that's been
that's
really
super cool. What museum?
Mhm. It's called the Booth Western Art Museum,
Hmm.
and it's in Cartersville, Georgia. It's a Smithsonian affiliate, and it's the largest collection of permanently displayed Western art in the United States.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah, it's all about the American West, which is like not my favorite topic, but the art, I mean, you can't not, love it and be really interested in it. So, my little cubicle in my office is like papered wall to wall with Van Gogh art that I printed out. It's just like it's like a vision board for a different art museum in the future. But like the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, I'd have to speak Dutch, and that's just it's not going to happen. So I just didn't figure I'd make my cubicle a little mini Van Gogh museum.
Loving Vincent is a 2017 experimental animated biographical drama film about the life of the painter Vincent van Gogh and, in particular, about the circumstances of his death. It is the first fully painted animated feature film, which is so cool. The film, written and directed by Dorota Kobila, maybe?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
I'm sure they're lovely people. My apologies for just absolutely screwing up their names. And Hugh Welchman, let's say, is a Polish-UK co-production funded by the Polish Film Institute and partially through a Kickstarter campaign. The story takes place 1 year after Vincent van Gogh's suicide, when postman Joseph Rouland, I'm assuming? Asks his son Armand to deliver Van Gogh's last letter. Rouland finds the death suspicious, as merely weeks earlier, Van Gogh claimed through letters that his mood was calm and normal. And as he travels around attempting to deliver the letter, he talks with those who knew Vincent about his death and life.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that they started a year after Van Gogh's suicide, and from the point of view of the postman. And for those, I was trying to find it in my Van Gogh books that I have here. The postman's portrait is one of very famous portraits that Vincent did. And I just thought it was interesting that they like took that man and gave him a whole life. I mean, of course he had a whole life. He is a real person. But like in the movie, they didn't have to, they didn't have to do that. And so I just thought it was so fascinating that they went from that angle, and that they sort of go through like I'm trying to find it. They go through sort of the investigation around his death is very interesting, because you don't think of Van Gogh's death as a murder. Of course, he's very famously probably one of the most famous deaths in history. And so for them to, start right off with, oh, here he is. Here's our postman. This is not the famous portrait, but this is another one, which is why I love this book so much. There are several portraits of him. There's one in pen. That's one thing too. Oh, nice. Most people don't know that Van Gogh liked to do it in pen, liked to draw in pen quite a lot. And what was I saying? Interesting that you don't think about his death as anything nefarious. And I don't know whether you've seen the spoilers, but I'm gonna spoil it now. It's not nefarious. It's like genuinely an accident. Yeah. But for them to sort of go from the perspective of people who didn't really know Vincent that well was interesting. Like the postmen get really involved in this investigation. I thought that was an interesting way to go about it, instead of like his brother or his sisters or his family, because he wasn't very close to them towards the end of his life, especially his parents. But throughout his life, he was very close to his family. So I thought it made for a really interesting narrative choice to sort of start at the end, basically. Like, and there are limitations to that, of course. Like, we don't get his relationship with Theo nearly as much as it was. We don't get the loves of his life. Like, many people don't know that he was in love many times in his life. And we don't really get we don't really get anything outside of his final place, basically, the final place that he lived, which is just such a small portion. That's why I had to read more, because it's like, this is such a small portion of his life. Like, what else was there? And there is 900 pages more of his life. So in terms of story, I thought it was really fascinating. And then they bring in all the, I don't want to say characters, but like basically all of Vincent's like models, and sort of animate them and give them a voice, which I thought was just brilliant.
Yeah, the juxtapositions in the credits of the actors like before being painted over and the actual paintings is really nice, especially for me because like I know Van Gogh's style to see it. I know of a couple paintings off the top of my head, and like I could watch the movie and recognize when something clearly was a pre-existing painting.
Yes.
But also like I didn't know the paintings well, so to get to see those exact side by sides was really nice.
Yes, and then that they like brought in a lot more than just Starry Night. It was very nice. It was a lot more than just like his most famous. And now I bet, since I've studied so much more of his paintings, I bet if I watched it again, I would be able to like really pick out all of the paintings. But yeah, I love that it's something that anyone can watch. Like you don't have to be an artist or a Van Gogh expert or even like you don't have to have any background, and you can appreciate it for what it is because the movie itself is art. So I loved how they did this in every aspect of it. Like I really loved it.
Vincent van Gogh killed himself?
How does a man go from calm to suicidal in 6 weeks?
Since we're working from paintings to begin with, the color contrast in this movie and the use of color is ridiculous and amazing.
Yes. Oh, you know what's interesting about that? Is that Van Gogh was actually really unique in his approach to color. Let me think. Let me make sure I get this straight. So we have like impressionists during his time, right? And we have people like George Seurat, who is painted Sunday Afternoon in the Park, on the Grand Sunday afternoon in the Grand Jatte, on the Grand Plot, something like that. Don't quote me. But he was pointillist. And pointillism is where you just have, I mean, people were like, oh yeah, you just dab the color on in little tiny points. I'm like, no, actually you dab like primary color in little tiny points. And the image that you're looking at is created by your eye. So that like giant painting of Sunday afternoon in the park, whatever. That's all done with the tiniest little primary colors. And when you get really up close to it, you can see it. So Van Gogh's
it's literally like analog pixelation, because like that's how pixels on a TV work. Like, goddamn, all right.
Yeah, so when you look at, let me find a good example. I mean, some of his older things, like his chairs and his other portraits, are unique for their I don't know, their normalcy. Like most portraits weren't of normal people, regular people, but his were. So Van Gogh basically took pointillism and said, well, does it have to be primary colors? I don't think so. So he basically did what we would do, I mean, what we think of pointillism as, but instead of doing points, he did brush strokes, essentially. Which is why his brush strokes are so thick and vivid and easy to spot. So you have his famous portrait here. Sorry, I've got my really nerdy like page turner on.
That's lovely.
You've got this really famous portrait. You see all these blues back here, and then you've got cypresses, which is a famous one. And basically he is taking these colors and using them in ways that weren't being used at the time. Taking them like, you look at Monet's and you look at Manet's and you look at Cézanne's, and they're all like pastel and like pretty and no offense to Van Gogh, but like they're pretty and nice to look at. These sort of jangle on your eye and they're like very stark brush strokes, and he wanted that. He wanted you to see, I mean, this at the cover, this brown in the background is canvas. Like it's bare canvas. So he's really doing something revolutionary in the colors in his paint. Here's a great one. This is the back. A really good example of his style. So you have all these little dots of color that sort of like form the whole picture, but they're not quite dots, and they're not primary colors. So he's sort of bringing in like a bunch of different styles. And then, I mean, it's just, he was doing stuff with color that just weren't done like in his time period.
Mm-hmm.
So his big influence was Delacroix, who did the French Revolution painting of Liberty holding the flag and like,
Oh, okay, yeah.
That one. So he was like, oh yeah, I want to learn color like that. And then he was like, actually, I actually might be better at like plants and things. So he really did a lot of incredible stuff with color that just like people weren't doing, and people didn't understand. Like his brother Theo was an art dealer in Paris. You'd think, oh wow, that's perfect. No one would buy his art. So anyway, the whole use of color in the movie is pretty well parallels his use of color in life. And it wasn't always like pretty either. Like some of his early stuff is like, here's the page that I'm currently on in the book. Some of his earlier stuff is like brown and black.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you would never think of that as Van Gogh. So, although, I mean, brushstrokes are pretty. Okay, well, normal people who have not been obsessively studying Van Gogh for a year.
From a distance, you definitely wouldn't know. Maybe up close.
Maybe up close you would be able to tell, but yeah, so his whole deal with color and light and painting, and it was just like revolutionary. Unfortunately, it was not appreciated then, as it is now. And it's funny because like directly after his death, it started being appreciated too. Because like people were like, oh, that guy? Yeah, I know him. Like they were like, oh, he's famous now for his death? Yeah, let me hop on that wagon train.
You want to know so much about his death, but what do you know of his life?
I wonder how they filmed it.
I wonder too. I just wonder how they filmed. Like in general, I wonder how they filmed. Like I really couldn't tell you. I really don't know. I wish I did. I should have watched a documentary before we did this.
Yeah, I know. If I'd known it existed, maybe, but it's just, assigned reading. Did you enjoy this podcast? Go watch that documentary. We certainly did.
Oh, and you should listen to another podcast called Finding the Portrait of Dr. Gachet, because that is a portrait by Van Gogh that has been missing since the 90s. And it's a very interesting podcast. Yeah.
Oh, geez.
The series in like 6 1-hour sessions, and they're all fascinating.
That's fair.
Anyway, so yeah, the Portrait of Dr. Gachet, that like, that's, okay, wait. Hang on, wait, no, it's in this one. I have to figure out which book it's in, and then I have to find it, and then I have to, like, no, wait, no, wait. Here it is. Well, this isn't it, but this is one of 2 portraits. So there's the Portrait of Dr. Gachet, right?
Yeah,
so
that's the one that you in the movie.
Yeah, but not many people know that this is a second one. This is not the original.
Wow.
The original has been missing for about 20 or 30 years now.
That is 30 years if it's the 90s.
Yeah, so that and the original is gorgeous. It's incredible. It's so much better than that. And they actually do use but they use both in the movie.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's fair.
They use the original, and then it's a sort of a subtle shift to the. I'll have to go back and like look at it again because I don't want to be saying something that's like totally off base. But I'm pretty sure they use both Dr. Gachets in the movie to portray Dr. Gachet.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had multiple comparison paintings in the credits, so I believe that completely.
And the original is so much better. Like, I don't know if it's the original or if it's the second one that he painted chronologically. I feel like it's the first one, though. Anyway, I'll further reading.
Yeah, fair. What else do you want to talk about before we wrap up? I have so many notes that are just like screaming about how impressed I am with the animation. Like, you know, one of my earlier notes is just like tracking shots, my God, like, you know, of how impressive it is to paint that, you know, and I have there's like one sequence in one of the like black and white, more realistic flashbacks that has Van Gogh looking at his face in water, and then he like puts his hand in the water, and like, God damn.
It's amazing, isn't it? Oh,
really impressive.
God. Incredible. That was one of my favorite scenes, with the hand in the water. But yeah, what did your mom think about it?
Oh, she enjoyed it. She thought it was very cool.
Yay!
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much else to say. I mean, Van Gogh's really I mean, I could talk about Van Gogh for hours, but I already have, so. I mean, it's just a really wonderful movie and a really good, a really good primer on Van Gogh's life, like a little window into his life that leaves you wanting more. So highly recommend checking it out, and then checking out his other art that is not quite so mainstream, not to be one of those, but like, you know, he's got other things. That's all I'll say. He's got a lot of
art.
Yep, he's got.
If the end title is to be believed, 800 paintings. So, you know,
Indeed. But
I'm sure we don't have all of those, but nonetheless.
I mean, this is all of his paintings. There are multiple ones.
We have most.
We have most of them. So yeah.
Yeah.
That's all
I mean, do you want to call that your final pitch for the movie?
That'll be my final pitch. I think so. Yeah. There's, I mean, if you're not into art or Van Gogh, too bad. Like it'll make you into art and Van Gogh. So just
quite possibly, especially if you think animation is cool at all, because
there you go.
Damn a bar.
Absolutely.
It's really good.
Absolutely. It's a terrible thing to like hear somebody talk about a movie and not be able to like see it in front of you. So whoever's listening will have to just watch a trailer or something so you get an idea.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It is a one of a kind film to my knowledge.